If you've thought we've gotten nerdy before, hold on to your keyboards and mice because we're going deep into technical specifics for the leading attribution platforms in this series. We're going to do 4 episodes this series, and we're bringing in folks who are typically behind the scenes of these technologies, helping customers succeed and making sure that you know what you need to do to be successful with attribution. So in today's episode, I'm joined here by Nic Zangre, who runs customer success and revenue operations at CaliberMind. He helps CaliberMind's customers with best practices and strategies around their attribution platform. And ultimately, him and his organization make sure that all their customers are successful and have great experiences with CaliberMind. So welcome to the show, Nic.
Hey, thanks, Drew. Good to chat again.
Yeah, good to see you. Good to see you. So I got to say, you might be the only person in the world that has your title of running customer success and revenue operations. So what does that mean that you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, it's funny. We're carving up the team and creating even another role called VP Solutions Architecture, whatever that means. I guess I have the rare distinction of coming from an operations background, somehow passed through analytics and SQL and building data warehouses to now running customer success, revenue ops, and solution architecture for CaliberMind. And it's been a wild journey. You know, it's one of those things. I joined the founding team as head of product to help build the product. But once you get 10 plus customers, well, someone has to take care of those customers. I guess I volunteered without volunteering, just by joining a startup and wearing all the hats. So here I am. You know, I just do whatever they tell me and just try to help customers. So
I love it. I love it. So how did you first get into marketing operations? Because I know you've been doing marketing operations for a long time. And like back when you started in marketing operations was a lot more niche than it is today. So tell me how you got into it.
I think my first title was after an intern was e-marketing specialist. We just called it e-marketing because there was no real term marketing operations at the time. This is about 20 years ago. And so, yeah, I got out of college and knew I wanted to work in marketing. I did a brief stint in education administration. That didn't work. I played professional poker for a while. It's not as fun to bluff your rent away. And so I decided to join as a marketing intern. And it was one of those things, right place at the right time. My boss at the time, we were implementing Eloqua and Salesforce. This is, old school marketing automation, pre-Marketo. And he said, hey, this cloud thing, there's something to it. This is going to be your golden ticket. So get certified in these platforms, learn all the nooks and crannies, and here I am building products now in the cloud. So it's been quite the wild ride and no regrets, no look back. So yeah, little right place at the right time, some luck and capitalizing on some early opportunities in my career. And it's been a wild ride.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. It sounds like you're definitely like right place, right time. That sounds about right for sure. So then you parlayed marketing operations into being a member of the founding team of CaliberMind. So how did that all come together?
Yeah, so let's see. I was running marketing operations at AdRoll, decided to go out on my own. I thought it'd be, more lucrative to be a consultant. And then before I knew it, one of my customers introduced me to the other co-founders at CaliberMind. And so here I am convincing my wife, Jessica, girlfriend at the time, hey, let's move out to Colorado. This is a pre-revenue company. So it'll be probably about a third of the money I'm making. But the industry needs it. I'm passionate about helping marketers solve problems. And at the time, the attribution solutions out there weren't really cutting it. I'd tried to implement some in the past and they're very hamstrung to what's in the CRM and architected not in a big data way. And so I saw a lot of opportunity that, hey, this space needs some disruption and maybe I can apply my marketing ops background to my new analytics talent and help build a company. So it's been a wild 8 years. And now we serve customers like ADP, MongoDB, NetApp, So some of the top enterprises in the world are using our stuff. So it's been super rewarding to see that all come to fruition.
That's awesome. That sounds like such a cool journey. Yeah, that's cool. I'm sure that I'm sure that conversation was with your now wife was a real easy conversation to have.
Oh, like, so easy. Yeah.
Hey, we're gonna move.
Leave everything behind, all your friends. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, she is.
But Colorado's awesome. I'm really glad that. Sometimes you just go where the road takes you, and we wouldn't have picked Colorado otherwise. But now we don't want to leave, so worked out for the best.
That's awesome. Love that. All right. Well, Nic, we're not going to do like a CaliberMind demo here because this is a podcast and nobody wants to see a demo on a podcast. But I do want to kind of set the stage at least a little bit about CaliberMind so that anybody that's listening that doesn't have direct experience with CaliberMind can start with a baseline understanding of what this tool is and what it does. So just give us a quick elevator pitch of what CaliberMind does, and then also a little bit about like what makes CaliberMind either different or better than some of your competition.
Okay. So I'm not in sales. All the titles I listed, sales isn't one of them. So here we go. So yeah, CaliberMind is a place to put all of your sales, marketing, and operations data. We normalize, dedupe, and standardize that data so that you can iterate on it and make that data and those models such as attribution, engagement scoring, funnel models, etc., machine learning models, make these portable so they can go into your BI tool, back into the CRM, and you can make real actionable decisions. So really where we pull apart from some of our competition is in the top most sophisticated enterprise environments where we have a full big data architecture and a full warehouse under the hood powered by Google BigQuery. So meaning if you have a data science team that can write machine learning models, they can do that right in the system in the warehouse. So where I'd say we're also well poised to outpace some of our competition is with the Gen AI piece. Because we're all native, we're a Google Premier partner. We have access to all their new Gemini, cutting edge APIs. So we're able to summarize vast amounts of data into a very simple buyer journey, do clustering around buyer groups, and even understand what marketing tactics are working at each stage of the funnel. Previously, that was really difficult, and you have models that don't talk to each other. You have these complex buyer journeys with thousands and thousands of rows of data and, having to skim through all this data. And so, yeah, I'd say our infrastructure scalability, our flexibility for the enterprise, if you have multiple CRMs, multiple marketing automation platforms, et cetera, is where we really excel. And then, being poised to take advantage of this AI sea change, I think it's a really exciting time to be in tech.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it wouldn't be a podcast in 2024 if we didn't talk about AI, at least somewhat, right?
Hey, we may be AI agents. You never know these days.
I don't know. I think an AI agent would be a lot better looking than I am. So, but yeah, I think one of the things that you mentioned that kind of resonates with me a little bit, particularly with the enterprise folks, is the ability to integrate with multiple CRMs, multiple marketing automation platforms. Enterprises, as much as we would like to think that enterprises are all consolidated and all under one source of truth, a lot of times they aren't. They've got divisions that operate completely independently of one another, that have their own systems, their own go-to-market, strategies, and the ability to plug into all of those and then centralize them into one repository. Like that's a big deal. That's a really big deal for enterprises.
Yeah, and I would add the data agnosticism as a strategy is a key point as well. These enterprises, they would have already invested in data, and they're bringing their own intent data to the table, and maybe they have Segment as a web tracker installed on their site. So who are we to say, no, use our web tracker instead? Maybe they have Adobe Analytics installed. Well, that's fine. It's still a web page and a form fill and an email click. And so we don't care if it's HubSpot, Marketo, Eloqua. We give these our customers the ability to rapidly switch tools As you know, there's 13,000 MarTech tools, something like that today.
Mm-hmm.
And they're always experimenting with new channels and new technologies. Or, maybe Marketo is not cool today, HubSpot or Inflection is cool. So just being able to have a consistent data backbone for reporting where I have HubSpot data, and then one day I switch to Marketo, and all of a sudden it's Marketo data. We're built in such a way that your BI team doesn't need to change any of their reporting. They're querying the CaliberMind event timeline, and there's going to be HubSpot data, Salesforce data, and whatever platforms you have. They are just hitting a unified timeline.
Yeah.
And that's where we're really, I think, built for scale. And we work with a lot of data scientists and BI teams, end up learning our schemas and our models so that they can not spend their time wrangling the data. I read this stat somewhere that 70% of data scientists' time, and these aren't cheap resources, mind you, 70% of their time is going to wrangling the data, deduping it, joining it up. So if we can take all that off their plate and automate it, then they could spend their time building models and really helping move the needle at their business.
Mm-hmm.
So we're kind of best friends with the data scientists that don't want to do all the grunt work.
I love that. That's awesome. Now, I'm going to ask you a really open-ended question, and I apologize in advance for how open-ended this is because it's really just broad and open. But when CaliberMind is set up in the best way possible, like, what does that look like? Like, it could be integrations, it could be like, some settings, or, just some like, what are some of the like hidden things that people may not know that CaliberMind can do, but when it's set up the best way possible, these things are being leveraged?
Yeah, wow, I could take this in a ton of different directions. I'll say, well, first of all, it starts from the planning and the alignment phase. So making sure that all the various teams and stakeholders are bought in to the vision. And the vision is being able to prove ROI and lower cost of acquisition across your business. And I say across the business because many folks implement attribution only concerning marketing. However, there's other teams that are obviously helping bring in revenue. This is sales teams, this is SDR teams, this is partners, this is customer success teams. So I think when you want to tell a true story of what a buyer journey looks like and uncover as much of the dark funnel as possible, you need to be aligned across all these teams, and all these teams are going to bring data to the party. So that's one, is really strong attribution models thrive off data. It has to be normalized and deduped and standardized, but to bring as many disparate signals as possible that are truly representative of all your revenue streams. So I'll say that's one. It's, the philosophy and strategy behind it and the volume and variety of data. Secondly, there has to be really strong, let's call it digital tracking. So, one of the mistakes I see companies when they're setting up their website, maybe they have like their application on app.com and their company on company.com. Well, in a world where third-party cookies are going away, you're going to want to build it all on the same domain so you can have a first-party cookie that captures all of your product-led data and your attribution data on one unified timeline. So I've seen poor implementations happen not because of the actual implementation, but because even how a website is structured versus an application. So, I'd say congruency, making sure all of the forms are integrated well.
Hey, hang on. I want to touch on that. You talked about website architecture being something that can either make or break an attribution solution.
It's a hidden, overlooked thing, but yeah, it's something.
Can you expand on that a little bit? Like what does bad look like and what does good look like?
Using a logical subdomain directory and subdomain directory is a key point. So something like having a landing page on go.company.com and www.company.com, that's okay. These are subdomains, the first part of the domain, right? But as soon as you have company1.com and company2.com, all of a sudden this is two first-party cookies. And so to unify a buyer journey, there's this concept for marketing automation, unknown and known visitor.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same in an attribution solution. You will have everybody starts as an unknown visitor, and then at some point they identify themselves either through a chat or a form submission or signing into your product. That identification needs to happen on the same parent level domain, company.com, as all the activity. So I've seen a mistake where you have all of your Google ads are going to one website, and then it says sign up for a free trial, and it takes you to a completely different website. And that breaks the link. You're going to lose all your UTMs. You're going to lose all your referral, where you came from. Did you come from organic, paid? So I'd say, the web strategy and the domain structure is important because, the folder structure. So like having a solutions/page or a product/page. That's important because you might want to score different sections of the website differently. And if it's just like page 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's no metadata about that page or no signals or tags on that page, there's no way that you're going to be able to do as granular of segmentation as you want to.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah, it's like what's before the dot, what's after the dot, what's after the slash, and then all of the JavaScript is set up in a way that anytime I give an email address to you, you have a way to de-anonymize me, whether it's chat, product sign in, or even like sign in with Google, sign in with GitHub, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's ways to do de-anonymization through all that. So you don't want to implement with just your marketing team. You want to loop in your product team as well and your web team so that they know it's coming. There's going to be not just my contact us form has to get integrated. It's all my sign-ins.
Yeah.
So did that cover the web stuff?
Yeah, no, that was good. I wanted to make sure that if anybody was listening, that they could kind of hear the details and the nuance there.
Yeah, if I go too geeky or too technical, like pull me out of the cloud.
Oh, no. There's no such thing as too geeky or too technical on this one, Nick. We're good.
All right, good. So
okay.
Back to your question. So I talked about the politics and the org setup as far as that, the web setup, also the CRM is set up is obviously critical. So this is things like, we're using campaigns and parent campaigns in a 2-level hierarchy. We don't recommend more than that. I've seen poor setups will come into a customer and they have like 6 levels of their hierarchy. Well, where do you put costs? Where do you put campaign members? What's a parent? What's a child? How am I going to roll up this data into any meaningful way for a CMO? So, in a best practice setup, you're going to have your campaigns in a nice, clean, semi-flat hierarchy. We're going to use responses on all those campaign member status. So, the classic example is you invite someone to a webinar and that is a sent email. When they register or attend the webinar, that is a response to that campaign. So clearly important that, we're ultimately trying to figure out which touches are meaningful in the system. And poor attribution implementations, they'll have no way to distinguish a non-meaningful touch from a meaningful touch. So I would encourage you to have the bar set high enough on what is a response to a campaign where it's interesting. So maybe even the registration for the webinar doesn't count. They have to watch the webinar for it to actually count as a response, for example. So there's the campaign hierarchy setup. There's the CRM setup. Another best practice thing where we notice in our top customers is they're really good with budgeting. And so they are budgeting on 2 different levels. One top down. This is a loaded one, pun intended. Your loaded costs across all of your sales and marketing. So this includes things like headcount and tools. So your CFO knows that they're writing a $10 million check to sales and marketing. But if you're showing an ROI and you're only accounting for $2 million of that investment, and it's going to make all your returns 5x higher than they actually are. So, best practice implementation, we'd have all our top-down channel costs in there. We're going to work with our CFO on that piece. And then our bottom-up cost, every campaign, every event sponsorship, every email deployed out of Marketo, there needs to be a cost on that program, a cost on that sponsorship. So this allows us to do bottoms up reporting from the campaign level and do ROI. Yeah, besides that, having broken processes and bad duplicated data never helps. So one of the things we come in, and an overlooked piece of CaliberMind is we are a data integrity tool as well. So we can do things like merge, duplicate contacts in Salesforce. There's a workflow for that. Or convert orphan leads to contacts on the account. Or maybe you have accounts without websites. Well, that's going to make all of your matching much harder. So maybe we'll run a workflow that's let's look at the email domains of people on that account. We're going to pick the most popular one and write that up to the account level. And now all of your matching is going to be much more consistent. So there's never a good time to start with attribution. People, they'll like, oh, my data's too dirty. No, get started, plug it in, and then analyze, and then use the tools in your attribution platform to remedy some of the data. And during that whole time, it gives you the ability to turn on your web tracker and start collecting data so that by the time your data is clean, you're not looking at an empty page.
So I like to call that, because everybody always wants to know when they're onboarding an attribution platform, how soon can I start getting value out of the tool? When can I start using the data? And that's one of the things that I always work with customers on is the thing that you have to do that's the biggest dependency on that is getting the web tracker started. So you want to do that as early as possible. That's what I refer to that as day zero. So you got to understand when day zero happens, which is when the web tracker gets installed. From there, everything you do after that is a step closer to value, even if you're spending that amount of time cleaning data, implementing, building segmentation, things like that. You're still inching closer and closer every day to value because you got day zero. You hit day zero already. So I think that's a super important takeaway for everybody is the sooner that you get started collecting the data that the attribution platform is providing you through the web tracker, the sooner you get to value, even if you have stuff to do after that, like cleaning data.
Yeah, you're shooting yourself in the foot. And I forgot this point, but and I agree with you 100%. But a secondary benefit of using a data agnostic vendor like CaliberMind is we can actually mine your old data as well. So, I know some vendors are hyper dependent only on having their tracker installed, but maybe you had your Marketo Munchkin code installed for a year. Well, Marketo's going to have web page visits, UTMs, form submissions. It might not be quite as robust as, say, a CaliberMind Analytics.js tracker, but there's still enough in there to build some model. So I would argue that we're the best vendor to do a cold start, where from day one, once you turn on the system and we export all the marketing automation and Salesforce data and segment and Adobe data, we actually can retroactively assign attribution, which is, I think a huge differentiator versus put at the tracker and wait for 6 months. So that solving that cold start problem is something we're really proud of.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. So I'm going to move on to a little bit of a different kind of way of managing the podcast episode here. We're doing something a little different. In this section, I'm asking the exact same questions to all the guests that are going to be on here. And so everybody's going to get a slightly different perspective on these things, but these are all things that people need to know to be successful with these platforms. So, number one, what are your UTM best practices, Nic?
CaliberMind. I'll speak from CaliberMind. As far as UTMs, for those who don't know, UTMs are the query parameters, so everything after a question mark in the URL. So despite popular belief, it doesn't have to say UTM in it. To put as many variables that have IDs as possible in all of your UTMs, I think is number one. Many of the marketing tools, including CaliberMind, including something like HubSpot, can actually go in and fix your UTMs for you. So anytime that UTM fixing is offered by your vendor or your marketing automation tool, enable it. And what this is going to do is, the UTMs we're pretty familiar with, something like UTM source equals Google, UTM medium equals PPC. The other UTMs, maybe there's a UTM campaign and it's, my campaign. But each of those parameters, each ad has its own ID, each campaign has its ID, each click in these products and these ad platforms have their own ID. So you need to make 100% sure that anytime you can pass in an ID into the UTMs, whether it's a campaign ID, an ad ID, a creative ID, a campaign group ID, something like a G-CLID, did they click through at Google? Any of these are clues ultimately for us to match back this click to an actual campaign and an ad. So if you just have UTM source equals Google, that's not enough. You actually want some parameter with the campaign ID. It could be campaign underscore ID. It could be UTM underscore campaign underscore ID. It could just be CID. HubSpot, I think, calls it like HS underscore CMP something. And so all the platforms, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, etc., they can dynamically populate these campaign IDs into the UTMs. So number one, absolutely critical, you're passing in those IDs, and it's going to give you a lot granular ROI reporting. And then the second component of it is, which I talked about earlier, is the web tracking. So where you are sending them, make sure there's a conversion point somewhere on the page and make sure that conversion point is on the same domain and it's integrated with your attribution solution so that we can de-anonymize the visit and give that advertisement credit for that lead that enters the CRM later.
Got it. Okay. All right. Next one.
There's probably more, but...
Yeah, I mean, I have some of my own, but this is about Nick, not me. So now, how should marketers keep track of and input costs into CaliberMind? Like, what are some of the best practices? Not like the technical, like, imported by a CSV, but like, what's the technical, like what is the best practices for this?
Yeah, so I was alluding earlier, there's a top-down cost component and a bottoms-up. And then something in the middle, a sub-channel. We'll ignore that one for now. But so top-down inputting costs. First, we need to work with our CMO or our Chief Revenue Officer, Chief Growth Officer, and understand what are the channels by which you're budgeting. So these are going to include non-traditional channels such as organic search. Generally, organic search, you have a massive content team, you're investing in content marketing, but it's not always as tangible to assign a cost to an ebook or a cost to a PR announcement. So, but that your CFO or your CMO has allocated a cost. So what are the channels? What is our quarterly loaded spend? And then doesn't have to be perfect, but what is the percentage allocation across those channels? So say I have $10 million and I know that 10% of my budget is going to go to brand. That's okay. Put 10% brand and then, 20% paid search, paid social, whatever. So that allows you to do top down. Then as far as inputting that cost, that could be as simple as a Google Sheet, or CaliberMind gives you a place in the product to manage these costs. So you can input it one or the other, or it could even come from a system like Allocadia or a marketing resource management system. So that's the top-down costs. For the bottom-up costs, every campaign in Salesforce that has campaign members should have a cost associated with it. Parent campaigns don't necessarily need costs. They're more like a shell. And then costs, the other costs should come directly from the APIs of the systems. So you should never be manually inputting what a certain Google keyword search cost. That should all be programmatic and pulled in through your attribution vendor's ETL, because it's going to be down to they go past pennies now. I think it's micros. They go down to the 1/1,000,000th of a dollar. So you are going to get much more accurate data going through a Google API than if you were trying to put in and round up the cents yourself.
For sure. Yeah. What's the like cadence or frequency that people should be managing their spend that you've seen work the best?
Yeah. For the bottoms up, the campaign level, that's, obviously daily if it's a
paid programmatic channel. There's no real reason to sync that more than once a day, but once the day is over, you should have enough information about the number of impressions, the clicks, and the ad spend for that campaign. So we sync ad platform data once a day. As far as Salesforce campaign data, try to get into the habit of doing it right when it's created. So we know we're buying a sponsorship fee on this date. Let's create a event campaign in our Salesforce, and let's put our sponsorship fee even before we attend the trade show. We're going to get in the discipline of putting our cost in upstream. And then, syncing it once a day. Most of our customers, they only require 1x per day refreshes of the attribution model. Once a day, I think is fine. And as far as the channel and top-down CMO costs, well, you're not going to have your CMO put in something every day. So that's maybe a quarterly exercise.
Okay.
But you can actually do a couple quarters ahead. And then go back and fix it later. So It's good to have, ideally, a budgeted cost and an actual cost, and then you can go compare where we on budget.
Okay. Got it. Now, let's talk Salesforce campaigns. Talk a little bit about how CaliberMind leverages Salesforce campaigns, and then what are your best practices for how people should structure campaigns?
Yeah. So, as being data agnostic, we don't require Salesforce campaigns whatsoever. Especially if we work with a customer that has MS Dynamics, or, one of our customers, they have all their campaigns in programs in Marketo, and they use Microsoft Dynamics, and there's no campaigns in the CRM. So, and we still need to be able to provide attribution there. So the best practices I'm going to say, they basically apply to wherever your campaigns live. This could be in a campaign management tool, some other warehouse, but as far as Salesforce campaigns specifically, I think we talked a little bit about campaign members, making sure campaign members, you have a strong process. Every unique type of campaign should have response statuses flagged. So this doesn't have to be, say, responded, but in Salesforce, every member status has a place where you can say, is this a responded member status or non? So it's important to really iron out your process there with your campaign setup. Every campaign should have a campaign type, especially at the child level. Campaign types should not be confused with channel, and that's a mistake I see folks making. So, and I think Marketo kind of screwed this up when they called their campaign types channels on Marketo programs. They should have let a marketing ops person in there to vet that. But for me, a campaign type is tightly coupled to a campaign itself. So picture webinar. Channel is, how did I learn about this webinar? Did I come into this webinar from an email, from a paid search? So once you have an attribution solution like CaliberMind, you no longer need a campaign for every channel. So we've come into, I've seen environments where they have webinar as the parent, and then they'll have webinar email, webinar paid, webinar SEO. But if you do it correctly, you're just going to append the channels onto the campaign members as they're coming in or in your warehouse. So then you just need one webinar campaign. Of the signups, you're going to append a channel to each touch. And this is going to really allow you to have a much more streamlined process when provisioning campaigns. It also sets the ground rules. What's a campaign type versus a channel? Channel is granular. It's at the touch level. Campaign type's at the metadata level at the campaign. So then once you have all your flat campaigns, so webinar 1, 2, 3, 4, I have members streaming in, registered, attended. Some are responded, some are not. These webinars are all going to have a cost. And this is a cost you generally want to try to be as loaded with your costs as possible. So, if don't put $0 to send out a Marketo email, it's really not $0. You spend 2 hours laying that out. You have, if you want to just do round numbers, just put $100 an hour. That kind of covers junior and senior, kind of just a nice round number. And so this took me 2 hours to lay out, so I'm going to put $200 on this campaign as the cost. And then as far as parent campaigns go, a mistake I've seen is where people get too off the rails with, again, how many levels in their hierarchy. So you're going to identify, what does a parent mean to you? Some popular parent themes are such as product line, initiative, or, say strategy. Other things you can add as metadata on the campaign. So instead of having webinar, part of a webinar series, part of a product line, part of an initiative, you could just have webinar, and then on that webinar campaign, it's part of this product as the parent campaign. The series and the other metadatas can go on the campaigns themselves. So because you're not, instead of having like 5 levels of your hierarchy, really all those top levels are like, say you have one Q4 campaigns. Well, that's a useless parent campaign because we know when the touch happened because everything's timestamped. And what happens when you get a response in Q1? So just ignore all those, like don't get in the habit of, too many levels of parents. I think for anything time series data, rely on the actual responses. And then I can take my webinar and say, here's Q4 responses, here's Q1 responses. I don't need to group it in 2 different parent campaigns and clone it. And, it's just too much overhead to maintain. So what's going to not make your marketing ops team want to quit? And that's how you should set it up.
Yeah. We don't want them to quit. They're important. They're important. What is like the one single most important thing that people need to get right in the setup of CaliberMind?
I'd say the segmentation. Looking at an attribution report and just seeing dollars and return is helpful, but ultimately what's going to be more helpful is if I can say, how much return or ROI are we doing against our A accounts, our B accounts, in financial services industry, in mid-market versus enterprise accounts. So a lot of times your segmentable attributes in the CRM may not be perfect, but you have a concept of what ones you want, and you can work with your attribution vendor often to standardize these attributes. So a common example is industry. You look in the average CRM and there's probably like 500 industry values, or sometimes more, 1,000. And it's something like FinServ, financial services, banking, right? It's like 30 ways of writing the same thing. So during an onboarding, we make sure, and we provide templates that are pre-mapped, but when it comes to job levels, departments, industries, regions, account tiers, all these are segmentable points, and all of them probably start from a mess in the CRM. And you want to think like, what can I make in a pie chart that's readable? I don't want too many values where I can't cut the pie. It's too thin, too many colors. I don't want to run out of colors on my pie chart. So use that as a benchmark. And then all of your segmentable fields, you're going to want to try to pare down to a manageable list that fits nicely on a pie chart. Anything else can be probably blobbed into an other bucket. It's too not important enough to concern yourself with. So that's the number one, I think. And then, harping on the web tracking and the web architecture thing, it's just with first party cookies, it's just too important these days. You would hate to lose a month of web data because you set your website up wrong.
Right. Yeah. Okay. That's good. I think that's one of the things that, in my opinion, people don't put as much forethought into is the segmentation. Yeah. Which is what are the different ways we want to slice and dice this data? One thing that I think that people could do to have better implementations is be ready to have that segmentation conversation and pre-plan how we want to slice and dice the data.
Yeah, spot on. And it's not just firmographics and account attributes, it's person attributes as well. It's campaign attributes, right? You're building lists of campaigns. Every campaign needs a type, and that's part of segmentation. How else are you going to pull a report on your webinars if some are spelled webinar plural, some are called live event. So, you're just going to have faulty decisions. And that's the most distracting thing. If you show a report to someone and they notice here's two ways of saying the same thing, and they're adding it up in their head, and it's just so distracting. It's like when you get the revenue number wrong and you try to talk to anyone, VP or up, but if that one number is wrong, they're going to ignore everything in the whole presentation.
100%. Yep.
Goes without saying, but please get your revenue. If it's ACV, is it ARR? Like, let's align on the same revenue number.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So how would you recommend that marketers think about reporting on ROI or just performance generally for things like brand that are typically pretty hard to measure?
Yeah, there's going to be paid channels, and there's going to be channels that are kind of in this weird limbo period, channels like direct. How do you do attribution if someone types in your website? You don't know where they came from. You don't know how they found out about you, but you do know that they typed in, and they didn't come from Google. They typed in, that's called direct. So anything that's non-paid to me is part of brand. So, say I know that I'm spending 70% of my marketing budget on paid search, paid social, content syndication, paid lead generation, sponsorships, affiliates. So I have 70% of the paid channels. Those ones are easy because there's usually a UTM or a campaign ID. There's a hard cost associated with it. I'm buying these leads from TechTarget. I know what every lead costs. And then you have brand, which is the other. So what I do is I start with the loaded marketing budget, say it's 10 million. And then I figure out what percentage of that is going to paid. So say it's 70. So that leaves me 3 million. So then I'm going to take all the non-paid channels, call it SEO, direct. Sometimes there's a couple other, offline sources or whatnot. And then come up with some agreed upon split. So say I got 30% of my budget left, 10, 10, 10, right? 5, 5, 20. So it's never going to be fully exact, but you have to be able to assign some cost to those organic and those content and those direct leads that are coming in. So to me, it's whatever's left over that's not paid.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. All right. Now
there's one example too. I mean, there's also some things in brand where it's a force multiplier. I like to use the example of, and when Nike signed Michael Jordan, they didn't really know the multiplier effect. How do you put a price on that decision? This is a billion dollar decision. So there's some intangibles like that with brand that you're never going to exactly have an exact ROI on, but do your best. It's a worthy endeavor.
That's where, when we have things like that, we tend to recommend to our customers to do things like lift analysis. So if we if we sign Michael Jordan, I mean, we're not signing Michael Jordan, but let's say we did. If we're signing Michael Jordan, we would expect to see increases to organic search and direct, right? That's where stuff like that's going to show up. So you look at, okay, cool. We signed Michael Jordan on October 1st. Cool. What happened to direct organic search starting October 1st?
Yeah, or just web traffic in general. Yeah, it's probably
web traffic in general.
Yeah.
But mostly people come direct and organically when you've got something like that going on. But you can look at it holistically too. But then what happened after we signed Michael Jordan? Did we see a lift in traffic of 50%? Well, cool. You can, as long as we didn't also launch a new product on October 1st.
Right. Yeah.
Then
not too many variables where it's hard to tell. Yeah. Right, it's funny you mentioned lift analysis. This is coming up a lot with customers. And, one of the ways we handle this is build a control group and a test group. So this is especially popular with things like LinkedIn engagements. So LinkedIn recently started giving its partners monthly engagement data by company, by domain. So what is a LinkedIn engagement? It means when you're scrolling and you see a post and you maybe comment on it, or you pause and you watch the video, or you spin the carousel. That is called an engagement. And it's been really hard to do view through attribution, seeing an ad driving by a billboard on the highway, how do you attribute that? You don't know unless there's a specific phone number to call and that vanity number has attribution. That's the best way to do it. But we're actually able to cohort and say, here's a group of ICP-A accounts that engaged with LinkedIn. Here's a group that didn't. And then what was their average deal size? What was their conversion rate? What was their velocity to opportunity? So lift analysis, yeah, I think that's super interesting, and kind of the market is really demanding this now. And we've really helped our customers build frameworks around test and control. And that I think is the, and to your point, it has to be an independent variable. It can't be all these other things happen too,
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So you isolate these variables, you do an A/B side by side, and you're able to get some really interesting insights. One of our customers asked, well, do our customers that touch more than one channel worth more than customers that only touch one? So in CaliberMind, that's just you build 2 segments and you compare them.
Yeah, that's we're seeing more and more clients that want to do lift analysis and some more kind of advanced things using the data created by the attribution platform. So
Absolutely.
It's incredibly rich data that works really well with things like lift analysis.
Yeah. Super trendy buzzword.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Drink every time you hear AI, right? Just kidding.
Oh, don't do that. That's
Lift analysis is the new one.
That's a trip to the hospital for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I actually have another question, but you already answered it earlier on. So I'll just kind of restate the question and talk about, how you kind of responded to it already, which is, one of the biggest misconceptions that people have with attribution is, do I need to have perfect data to get started with multi-touch? And we already talked about that. No, you don't. You don't, because in your case, CaliberMind will actually help you run workflows to clean up and normalize and dedupe data. So you absolutely do not need perfect data to get started.
Yeah, that's spot on. And there's if you pick the right attribution solution, you're going to get more than just attribution and other side benefits. So, say your campaign hierarchies are a mess. So you use that as an excuse. Well, say you didn't use that as an excuse. You put on your web tracker, you start getting data. While you're fixing your campaign hierarchies, you could be sending intent qualified accounts to sales. You could be accelerating your Tableau, your BI teams, joining and matching of the data. Maybe you saved $50,000 because you didn't have to buy an ETL tool to get your data in the warehouse. So there's all these like side things and benefits you're getting, and then the ability to fix it. And even how bad is my data? Try to go into Salesforce and write a report that says, how many duplicates do I have? There's no way in Salesforce to do that. But if your data is in a warehouse, in an attribution tool, that's a simple, 2-line query that you can count your duplicates or build a report on it. And it's going to help you understand how bad your data is, or if it's more anecdotal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've definitely seen organizations that have plugged into attribution and then used the data in attribution to figure out where the holes are in their data. Yeah.
Yeah, you could analyze a couple opportunities and you say, hey, I know this guy John had 5 touch points, only 3 are showing an attribution. Why is that? And then because there's a duplicate of John over here with the other 2 touch points. Yep. And so having those, like really looking at those buyer journeys and using it for data forensics and help you decode everything, that's going to really accelerate your data cleanup. I mean, I remember in marketing ops, we hired a contractor to dedupe our Salesforce. That was a $20,000 engagement. And now it's, an hour in CaliberMind. I can dedupe your entire Salesforce. Yeah. I'm talking email addresses, accounts, campaigns, everything. So it's come a long way.
Yeah. The one other thing I was going to mention on that is when you have an attribution system in place and you start to see some of these data inconsistencies, it's a really good way to light a candle under the ass of whoever needs to get working on cleaning up that data. Because it's like, look, Look what we could have.
Right.
If this data were clean,
Right.
look what we can do. And now all of a sudden there's pressure, right? There's pressure to say, hey, oh, okay, we gotta go clean this shit up because we could have X. It's just that whole thing like we could be living in the future with flying cars and robots, but no, we're here because of these problems, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
You're getting in your own way. Get out of your own way, right?
Yep.
But yeah, you need someone to light that fire. That's going to be that catalyst. It seems like some revolutionary that's going to say a couple unpopular things and have the courage to do it, and then your team will thank you later.
Yep. One more question. This should be a quick one. There's a lot of misconceptions out there about how big of a team is needed to manage an attribution system. So, with CaliberMind clients, like how many people are on the team that manages CaliberMind?
Yeah, it's highly client dependent. ADP, there's a team of 15 people just doing QA right now over there. We're finishing up the implementation, and they're all finding things. They're doing fantastic work, but it's because they have 12 business units. They have over 1 billion rows of data in their attribution model. So yeah, it kind of scales based on your data size. I think if you are really lean and you have budget, I would invest in either an agency like Attributa, or through the vendor, you can get professional services, and you're never going to regret like having an expert on your side during the project. But take whatever time you thought you were going to need and add 30-40%, and that's probably the right number, because you're going to encounter data skeletons. You're going to find maybe your website is set up subpar, and now I have a whole other line of work where I have to go clean up my website and reorganize my website. Or maybe I encounter a skeleton where product data that's isolated in this other data warehouse, and I need my product sign-ins to build my attribution model. So I think it's not in the initial build out, it's usually not where all the time goes. It's maintaining, tuning, adding more channels. It's a constant process. And the model that you start with is never going to be the model that you have 2 years after.
Right. Yeah.
So it's an ongoing process.
Agreed. Yeah. We see the same thing. It's no different than having, somebody that manages Marketo or HubSpot, right? Like somebody's got to be steering the car, right? So,
and the more people you have, the more campaigns you can get out, the more, engagement you're going to drive, and the more revenue. You might start to, per employee, get slightly less as you hire more and more. But there is definitely some way to chart it out where the more people focused on business intelligence and decision making, the more rich and better strategy your company will have. So, it's usually a web person, marketing ops, sales ops, some VP of demand gen, or that can help drive the strategy, and then some of the time from the rest of the team on training, QA, and then some of your marketing, your top leaders' time as well. Quarterly business reviews, you're going to want to work with them on the top-down budgeting, and there's some data that only they're only privy to, and you're going to need to work with them on how can I get that data out and in the model in a way that makes everybody feel comfortable.
All right. Well, Nic, we are going to wrap up here with some key takeaways, some of the things that I've learned as part of this conversation. So a few things that I picked up on. Number one, CaliberMind is best friends with data scientists that don't want to do the grunt work. I love that quote. That was awesome. From a Salesforce campaign perspective, you mentioned that you should not have more than 2 levels of hierarchy in parent-child relationships there. I think that's an important thing. Another thing that's super critical to success here is in CaliberMind is that strong digital tracking. That could be as simple as just web architecture, domain architecture, things like that. You did note about when it comes to costing, you have to think about both top-down and bottoms-up costing. That's really important. We talked about this one a couple times, that there's no good or bad time to start attribution. Just get started and find out where the skeletons are in the closet. Because once you get that tracking system set up, you're not going to be wasting any time. Your every day is still a step closer to value. And then another one that you mentioned that I thought was really good, I particularly love this quote of yours, is when you were talking about segmentation being important, is you mentioned that you don't want to run out of colors on your pie chart. And I think that's a really good way to think about segmentation. Any kind of segmentation, you don't want 100 segments, because if you have 100 segments, you can't build a chart that has 100 segments. You just can't.
And this goes with campaign types, channels, industries, whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Well, Nic, those were my big takeaways. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today and tell us a little bit about CaliberMind and talk about, some of your experiences and what makes for a good CaliberMind, implementation. I hope our listeners learned a bunch. So, yeah, thanks, Nic. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Drew.